Hey guys, I'm so excited to have you here. We have guests from 4 time zones. I've been working really hard on putting all this information together now for, I don't know, a while. It's one of the most common questions that comes up in practice when we get people on treatment. They want to know, can I still drink wine? What can I do around the holidays? So I thought this is the perfect time to do a webinar. This is the perfect time to talk about wines that actually support our well-being, that won't throw our hormones off. But how about wines that actually might have some health benefit? So let's definitely get right down to it. Hey, if you are brand new to wine, if you saw something on social and you said, hey, you know what? I want to learn about wine. I want to learn about the right wines for me to drink. I want to welcome you. If you gave up on wine, if you totally threw in the towel on wine because you wake up feeling like a freight train drove through your forehead, I want to say, hey, and welcome. And of course, if you're just like me and you love wine and you've enjoyed wine forever and you just want to choose the right wines, I want to say, welcome. I'm so excited to have you guys here. You know, the truth of it is we need to be real about the fact that commercial wines can contain any combination of up to 70 FDA approved additives, you guys, okay? Scary stuff like skim milk and vinyl are added to wine to not only improve their taste, but of course, right, extend shelf life. Now, the real quandary of all of this is that in the US, the alcohol industry is exempt from labeling laws. So you're not going to get a lot of transparency there. I get a lot of patients that tell me, well, I have a wine and it says that it's, you know, no sugar, low sulfite. We're going to get into all of that because that's not exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about true transparency in what happens from the grape to your glass. So before we do that, I want to tell you who I am. I'm Dr. Francesca LeBlanc. I am your host. I'm a doctor of natural medicine. I am the CEO and founder of LabWell Healthcare. We are a virtual functional medicine clinic, and we get to the root cause of your health challenge. So whatever it is, whether you've been dealing with something for decades, whether you are dealing with something brand new, we get to the root cause of those symptoms. We use nutraceutical therapy, we make lifestyle modifications, and the beauty of it is this all happens in the virtual space. So as long as you have phone and Wi-Fi, we can work together. Now, a little bit about me. My relationship with wine runs deep, you guys, okay? Let's just do a little cheers to that. I'm a working mom, okay? And I got 2 tiny humans at home. So the truth of it is, that's how I oftentimes wind down, okay? Wind down to wellness, you get me now? That's where the little title came from. You know, when I had my second baby, I had kids much later. I think that in the hormonal fluctuation of things, something happened and all of a sudden wine didn't agree with me. And I couldn't figure out why. I have loved wine ever since I was legally able to, and probably before that. And I don't know what exactly happened after baby number 2, but wine didn't agree with me. A sip of wine left me with the worst brain fog, headache. There were other wines that would just make me feel like a complete truck ran over me. And I started to try and figure out what this was because surely I wasn't going to completely turn my back on wine, right, forever. So just so you know, that's what kind of led me down this road, and that's how I've sort of discovered more natural wine that is better for you, and actually wine that supports your well-being. So before we get into some really nasty stuff that's going to shock you that's in wine, I want to talk to you about 2 ingredients that I think are actually the most common ingredients that give wine a bad rap, because I guarantee if you find or know somebody that says, I can't have wine, it has too many, what do you hear? Sulfites and sugar. So let's talk a little bit about that. So sulfites, okay, you guys, sulfur dioxide is the compound that occurs naturally in the fermentation process, okay? So when yeast ferments, sulfur dioxide is a natural occurring compound. Now, it should stop right there. That's a natural byproduct of the winemaking process. It doesn't become a problem until a winemaker says, hey, let's add extra. So added sulfites to wine, some vineyards do this to actually prevent oxidation. So if we do that, then what? We have a longer shelf life to the wine. But the truth of it is, if you're shying away from wine because you think you're allergic to sulfites, we're going to do a really fun experiment right now. I promise you that I would say 9 times out of 10, when I give a patient this experiment, they say, oh, so the truth is, let's talk about the foods that actually contain more sulfite than a glass of wine, okay? Dried fruit, salmon, eggs, onion, tomatoes, and here's a real showstopper, maple syrup. So if you're out there and these are foods that you're accustomed to eating on a regular basis and you have zip, zero, zilch reaction, you do not have a sulfite problem. Now, if you do, then you might have a sulfite problem. And there are wonderful functional lab tests we can do to actually narrow that down to ensure that it is a sulfite sensitivity or an intolerance. But if you're eating these foods, which are way higher in sulfites than a glass of wine, then sulfite is not your problem when it comes to wine. And as we get further through our talk right now, you might think the same. So again, give that a shot, try that on for size. I promise you it's a fun experiment because it might open your eyes to the fact that sulfites aren't the problem. The other biggie we hear all of the time is sugar. I can't drink wine, it has too much sugar. Well, FYI, wine comes from grapes. So grapes contain fructose. There is going to be a residual amount of sugar left over after the fermentation process, right? Because what's going to happen is that, ripe grapes contain their natural sugar. Most of it is going to be converted to alcohol, but then some will remain, right? The problem is that some winemakers then add sugar. So it's the added sugar. It's not necessarily the natural occurring stuff that will happen in the winemaking process. And heads up, if you are one of my folks who is maybe borderline diabetic, or you're on the cusp, you have high A1C, or you actually are full-blown diabetic, the truth is there are scientific research-based studies that show a moderate amount of drinking red wine actually increases your insulin sensitivity. This is what you want if you have a blood sugar problem, right? Your body is inefficiently processing sugar and you have a situation called diabetes. Well, if you're drinking a natural wine that is naturally low in sugar, no sugar added, then you are actually improving your body's ability to break down and process sugar by way of increasing your insulin sensitivity. So that's food for thought for my metabolic disease patients who are struggling with managing their blood sugar. Think about it like this. If you're going to then choose a wine from dry to sweet, which one do you think would have the most sugar? And you're right, the drier wines have the least amount of sugar. In fact, the natural drier wines have less than 10 grams a bottle. So when you're drinking a glass, it is really truly trace amounts of sugar at that point. So I don't want, from this point forward, sulfites or sugar prevent you from enjoying wine. Now, here's where we get into the good stuff, right? Because wine buyer beware. There are for sure 4 ingredients that I say steer clear from. Don't go there, okay? Of the 70, there are actually 4 that I do not believe will support your health in any way, shape, or form, okay? So let's dive right in to the unfortunate truth about pesticides. So everybody has heard the word glyphosate. Everybody knows the word Roundup. The truth is that it is a genetically modified pesticide, but a very widely used herbicide, fungicide, pesticide in not only the wine industry, but meat, poultry, fruits, vegetables, produce. You get where I'm going with it. Now, the sad truth is that residual amounts of glyphosate will create neurological imbalances over time. There's a lot of patients that can experience neuropathy, numbness, and tingling, visual disturbances, brain fog, headaches. Those are minor, but there are, on a scale, folks that have developed certain forms of cancer from exposure to glyphosate. You don't have to believe me on this because there's a huge research-based article out there, and it is for a gentleman who actually developed cancer. He was a maintenance worker in California for a school system where he was using Roundup, required to, for his job, and as a result, developed terminal cancer. Now, what does that mean? The wine you've been drinking now for 20 years, are you going to get cancer? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is be aware that unless it is a natural, biodynamic, organic, dry farmed wine, any of the combination or not, you are exposing yourself to trace amounts of pesticides, primarily glyphosate. Now, the truth is that I talk a lot about endocrine disrupting chemicals because I don't think, have enough honest conversations about what we're putting on our skin, what we're putting in our body, and how it can affect us. And if we don't invest now and make higher quality food choices and really good wine choices, right, we're going to pay for it later because this stuff is going to catch up with us. The endocrine system is an intimate network of glands: your thyroid, your adrenals, your reproductive organs. We don't need to insult the harmony of these glands. If you're somebody that's struggling with weight loss, fertility, anything regarding hair loss and all sorts of neurological things, you might want to consider endocrine disrupting chemicals, getting them out of the door. You'll find a lot of this on my website. Head on over to labwellhealthcare.com for tons of research-based articles there. So I think we beat pesticides over the head. Let's move on to another surprising ingredient like dye, okay? So there's something actually called mega purple. You guys, it is derived from commercially grown grapes, and it is almost like a syrup, like a grape juice. The truth is, it does not come from organic grapes. They are not biodynamically grown grapes. So what you're getting is probably a conventional, commercially grown grape that is now concentrated and in a dye. Now, why would a winemaker want to use a dye? Well, the truth is that it will, at the end of the winemaking process, help them stretch a buck, because if it doesn't taste great, they can add mega purple, this dye, and will not only improve the taste, the texture, the quality, but give it a really deep, rich purple color, which sells better. So FYI, if you are somebody that likes those sweeter, darker wines, you are probably getting a good dose of mega purple, and you might want to reconsider. So we're going to talk more about what that means at the end when we are making better wine choices. Now, the next ingredient should or maybe should not surprise you, right? Because when we are talking about converting sugar to alcohol, you have this natural process, right? That's how you ferment wine. Now, on the vine itself, grapes have residual amount of yeast. So winemakers, natural winemakers, work with what they've got. It becomes a problem when that manufacturer chooses to add additional yeast. And at that point, it's a genetically modified organism. And there's no organic yeast that they're going to add at the end when they want to expedite that fermentation process. Because when they do that, you're going to give that wine a punch. So a good GMO, genetically modified yeast, will do that. One of the most common side effects of consuming GMO yeast, and you know if you've had it, is a whopping migraine, and this is very, very common. So for women especially, if you have shied away from wine because of that like searing migraine, you really want to address the wine you're drinking and go ahead and examine whether or not it has an addition of yeast. Now we'll get into how we can be super sleuths about this at the end, but I want to touch on one more group, and it is actually, it's my fourth ingredient, which I think you should avoid at all costs, but it's actually a group ingredient. So I'm going to show you what I mean here on this next slide. They're called defining agents. Okay, this is where things get really gross, if you ask me, because in my glass of wine, I do not want trace amounts of casein, skim milk, albumin. You know, albumin is your egg protein, casein is your milk protein, carbon, or PVPP. This is super long, and I'm going to butcher it. Polyvinyl polypyrrolidone. Okay, P. I don't want vinyl in my wine. Do you? I mean, these are things that winemakers add right at the end. They're also called clarifying agents, so fining agents, clarifying agents. They want to smooth the wine. Believe it or not, most winemakers are interested in taking the cloudiness out. And that's what these fining agents do. And it probably doesn't make sense. They're thinking of like, how could adding milk or vinyl to my wine take the cloudiness out? It makes no sense, I know, but that's what they do. And you'll find actually when you start exploring your adventure with natural wine, which I hope you do at the end of today's presentation, you will find that most of them are cloudy. They're not actually easy to see through at all. So cheers to cloudy wine. Now, let's move on to the surprising reason why you might be experiencing a wine hangover, okay? If you've gone through and you said, okay, you know what? I don't think I have a reaction to any of these things. The shocking part of it is that if you're somebody that's got a dairy intolerance, or you have an egg intolerance, a yeast intolerance, you don't know it, you drink wine, you feel like crap, train hit you the night before, or maybe you do, and you're still drinking wine and you're like, that's why I've shied away because I still feel like garbage. There is actually something else, maybe something else brewing, okay? Your gut health is so important, okay? Especially if it's getting in the way of your wine drinking, okay? I mean, if this isn't like a PSA to tighten up the gut, then I don't know what is, but we need to really focus right now and talk about what is happening when we talk about leaky gut and intestinal permeability. You guys, this is so crucial to so many processes in the body. If your gut is inflamed, if you have a scenario called leaky gut and the cells are separating, any food or drink that you consume is not being integrated, assimilated, and eliminated. It's passing through the gut, it's traveling around the body. So the wine itself might actually not be your problem, and you might actually have a gut issue. Should you address, you would be able to drink wine again. So I wanted to kind of give you both scenarios where you have these sort of additives that are almost like criminals because they're ruining our ability to enjoy wine. And then you have this other deeper issue, which will give you virtually no warning signs. So when we talk about the gut and leaky gut syndrome, intestinal permeability is what we call it clinically, you know, you could have a myriad of things going on in your body. So skin conditions like eczema and psoriasis, this is very common. Hard to think, right, that something going on in the gut could express itself that way in your skin, but very, very common. Another one is food sensitivities, right? Gluten, dairy, sugar, corn, soy. If you have a gut issue, food sensitivities are actually really, really common. And folks that work with us in the functional medicine practice, once they get the gut under control, can oftentimes return to eating those foods that they've loved. Another big one, you guys, is poor absorption of nutrients. So if you've got a gut issue where these cells are leaking and you're not absorbing the minerals and the vitamins that you need, you know, what do you feel like crap all the time, right? But again, there's not enough of a profound reaction for you to go and do something about it, right? Most oftentimes the patients we work with are like, I'm so used to feeling this way, right? I've been feeling this way for 20 years, so it's fine. So that is why it's not a stop you in your tracks scenario. Now, when we talk about the autoimmune stuff, sometimes that is because when you're dealing with lupus or IBS or IBD, these gut issues are pretty significant because the symptoms are absolutely life-changing for some people. Now, the last one and the biggest one, which I always leave for last, save the best for last, is mental health. If you've been following me for any amount of time, you know that gut health equals mental health. So if you have a gut issue, if you're somebody that's dealing with, you're struggling to balance your mood, if you feel down and out, if you deal with seasonal affective disorder, you've got to go back and make sure the gut is nice and tight, because 80% of your body's happy chemicals, serotonin, are produced in the gut, and it will not uptake to your brain. You will not get the happiness that you need if you have a leaky gut. So in summary, it's so important to make sure that you don't have an underlying gut issue, because truly it might not be the wine itself. It might be a more serious thing to think about. Now, we can talk a little bit about what we're going to do with that in a second, okay? What I want you guys to do is actually become wine wellness warriors, okay? So if there's a wine that you love, I'm going to put you up to a challenge. The wine that you love, that you've been drinking forever, you're going to get on the horn with that manufacturer, and you're going to inquire about additives. You're going to demand transparency, right? Your health depends on it. So what I think, it might be painstaking, I know, it might be worth it. What if you find out the wine you love is actually more natural than you really thought? You know, send the emails, do the footwork at the very least. But if you're for sure saying, you know what, I know that the wine I've been drinking has been making me feel awful, then you want to follow this sort of guideline. So if you're going to buy a wine from a United States vineyard, you always want to opt for organic, biodynamic, or dry farmed wine. So what does that mean? Now, biodynamic farming has been around since, I want to say, the 1920s, okay? And it's the process by which real super intention is taken to the soil and what is grown, working with nature, and a real respect to nature. It's the whole philosophy of farming. Organic, the USDA did not come up with this term until much later, maybe 20 to 30 years later. So it's really like the sister to biodynamic farming. So organic is like the evolution and the modern version of it. But again, you're going to be able to bypass anything genetically modified if it is organic, if it is biodynamic. And then, of course, you can also choose a dry farmed wine. And those are wines that actually do not get any irrigation. They are farmed in a manner in which they just rely on rainfall. So those wines have a tendency to be more natural as well. Now, I'm over here live at Wild Child Wines in Lafayette. Very, very blessed to have a natural wine shop where we work and live. But if you don't, you can start sort of browsing. You can visit your local wine shop and ask for, you know, more information if they carry a small amount. Any wine that is natural is obviously produced in tiny amounts. So you just have to kind of do the legwork and maybe develop that relationship with that store owner. There's also a wine subscription through Dry Farm Wines. It's actually one of the subscriptions I did before this wine shop opened, because it was really the only way I could get natural wine. It's wonderful. It just comes to your door, dryfarmwines.com. But then this wine shop opened, so I'm very blessed to have that. Now, if there's a wine that you love outside the US, the funny thing is, right, most countries, especially at least the ones in Europe, they do not use glyphosate. It is actually against the law. We use it here, but it is against the law in all of the countries within the European Union. So you will not have that trip up as far as the Roundup residual is concerned when you're buying a wine from Europe. Now, any questions you might have about anything we went over today, you can definitely shoot us an email over at Nikki, our virtual assistant. Would love to answer those questions for you. And she's at labwellhealthcare.com. If there's something you've been struggling with outside of wine, maybe there's a health challenge you have questions about, you want to know how our virtual process works, we would love to give you more information. You can explore and browse all over labwellhealthcare.com or send Nikki an email. Now, I want to answer any questions you might have. Anyone? Okay, so what we'll do is this. So we will, if you were unable to get the whole presentation, what I'm going to do is I will send you a replay and you can watch it at your leisure if you wanted to quick go back and say, I forgot what she said about that. Or go ahead and, of course, contact us if you have any further questions. I want to say thank you so much, you guys, for spending this time with me. And, of course, well, now we have a bunch of questions. Okay, hold on. I'll answer a couple of these and I'll let you guys go. Great question, Allison. If white wines also contain dyes, you know, Mega Purple is basically a purple wine, but there are other dyes that we've seen being used in white wine, and those have a tendency, oddly enough, to be more broadly using dairy products in the fining of the white wine itself. So more away from the usage of the darker dyes, but like stronger using the dairy in the fining process. I don't know, Luann, what fit vine wine is. It sounds interesting. Like I might be interested in that. So I'll have to do some research there. So you guys, again, I want to say happy Thanksgiving. Be safe. And I hope you can enjoy a little bit of wine now that you have a ton of knowledge. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.